Hello everyone, I'm Chris Wynn. Welcome to the Roker Report podcast in association with the Sunderland Community Soup Kitchen as we once again catch up with you as we have plenty to talk about. First, we've got the game on Saturday, which I promise we won't spend too long dissecting, and we also have the events from Monday night to chew the fat over. So to help me run through it all, we have Craig Chapman. Hello, Craig.
Hello, mate. How are you?
I'm not bad. I was actually, and we kind of mentioned it before we start recording, but I was trying to think back, and I'm sure the last pod we did was that hungover pod after the playoff final weekend, because I'm pretty sure we haven't done one since.
Well, since then, there's been a lot of talking points. I think we'd be here for a couple of hours to go through and unravel them all, but quite a bit to cover off from the past few days.
Well, that's it. I think it's going to be a slightly different tone, this pod, to the last one we did, to be fair. Let's start with Saturday's game and get that out the way. I had family commitments this weekend, so I couldn't make the game. I couldn't even watch it on the sly. So I've been playing catch up. And, I was thinking back to my last word on the midweek pod last week, and I said we'd wipe the floor with Cardiff, just purely because looking at Cardiff, I thought they were there for the taking. I mean, because I wasn't there, Craig, are you able to sum up what went wrong? Because I've only been able to read the reports, the main BBC one, the general one, Andy's ratings on the site. Can you summarise for me what went wrong on Saturday?
Where do we start? It probably all went south at about 2:00, I think, when the team news came out. Look, it was poor. It was really, really poor. Tony Mowbray, he'd mentioned in the week that the Huddersfield game was the worst performance of his time in charge, which was probably a little harsh, all things considered, but I think the Cardiff performance, that really does eclipse that. It was so below par. Ultimately, the scoreline actually flattered us in the end because, they really should have had the game wrapped up by half time. What it demonstrated for me was why we are so heavily reliant on some of the lads who are out injured. And I think it showed the obvious importance of some of the missing senior players as well. You maybe look at Alex Pritchard, certainly Corey Evans, and, you kind of get why those two weren't involved because at their age they are going to have difficulty to play a Saturday, Tuesday every week, but the lack of experience in midfield in particular was really noticeable, and we came up against a very aggressive side and we paid the price. I think we just got it wrong straight away from kickoff, really.
I think Tony Mowbray made the comment after the game that we just started off badly. I mean, you mentioned what he said after the Huddersfield game. I thought it was a bit of psychology from Mowbray. I thought he was trying to, the players got 3 points away from home and he was almost trying to slap them back down because we haven't won back-to-back games. But do you think, I don't know, I just think, is it kind of a mental hurdle we've got to get over this season that to win those back-to-back games? Because it just seems that whenever we get the win, we just seem to kind of crash back down to earth with a performance like that, or at least a result that doesn't go the right way.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, but I think probably what ultimately makes the Championship one of, I suppose, the most entertaining leagues going. Any team can, go turn up, have a go and take points off the other. But that being said, I think the longer this continues, then, it is going to be a bit of an underlying issue. It is going to be the monkey on the back, so to speak. And the home form, it has been addressed as worrying, rightly so. But look, I think we've won a lot of games this season so far in varying ways. We've went and won at Reading in a particular special style where we've played them off the park. We've come from behind by beating, say, Wigan at home. So we've won in a degree of different ways. But I think in terms of winning back to back, ultimately what we need to do is by hook or by crook, we've just got to do it. And like I say, you kind of touched on the psychology of it, but I just think over the course of the past few weeks we're limping towards the halfway line now, obviously with the adjournment for the World Cup. But I don't think it's as big an issue as perhaps has been made out. I just think ultimately this is the nature of this division. You are going to win one week, you're going to lose one week. However, I think what we need to do, obviously, after the season picks up again after the World Cup, hopefully once we've got our stronger players back, is we're going to have to try and put some form of run of form together, and we are going to have to try and kick on because, as quick as we can get up the table, we can also get dragged down very quickly as well. It's very, very tight now.
I mean, you've just mentioned, obviously, how it is in the Championship, and that, that's kind of how you've got a big chunk of teams who are exactly that. They're just inconsistent for whatever reason, whether it's a style of play or whether it's the kind of makeup of the squad. But I mean, just looking at our squad and the way we play, I mean, is that the kind of the way we play with committing lots of players forward and having, an average age of sometimes 22, 23? Have we just got to expect that this season?
I think with the current course of direction that the club has taken, I guess so, because we have invested into this model where we are trying to, bring a lot of younger guys through. But I think it has been very apparent of late, the likes of, if you lose a player of, say, Corey Evans' experience and his importance to the side, we don't really have anyone like for like to come in. So there is a lot of young bodies in there. And I guess some of that naivety has been exposed. We do have a lot of wonderfully gifted footballers. But like I say, I think what we are lacking at the moment is a lot of depth. And I think at the moment, like I say, what we need to do is we just need to get over the next hurdle of the Birmingham game, and then hopefully we can reassess what we need come January. But I think this is to be expected. Like I say, obviously it's a learning curve. There's a lot of players who have been on this journey with us so far who don't have championship experience, and although that is, kind of subsidised, so to speak, with the likes of your Danny Baths and Bailey Wright, but they can only take us so far. Like I say, this season it's going to be a learning curve. This still remains a team and a club in a massive transition. But hopefully, if we can plug some of those gaps in the squad, we can return to a decent bit of form.
I mean, just to bookmark this game, because like I said, I wasn't there, but I just wanted to. I'm trying not to end on this point when talking about the game, but I saw Andy's ratings on the site, and that the headline for Andy's ratings was that it was the worst performance of the season. I mean, is that pretty much a fair statement for Saturday's game?
Yeah, I think so. I think just in terms of we just looked poor all over the pitch. Like I said beforehand, the result, it certainly flattered us. There was a complete lack of understanding at times. We were like a rabbit in the headlights for a large portion of that game, and we lacked a lot of quality. That being said, that doesn't necessarily mean that these players are bad or they've gone bad overnight. You're going to get games like this at all levels. We had games like this in League One. We're going to get games like this in the Premier League as well, where you can't string any passes together. You can't do the simple things, and that's just what it was like. It was one of those afternoons. But you give Cardiff their credit. They ultimately were aggressive in what they've done. They forced us into a lot of errors. They were obviously, responsible for pressing us and forcing the penalty, which, on a positive note, Anthony Patterson made a tremendous save from. But like I say, although it can be viewed as deflating, ultimately we're still in a healthy position. We're still in a position where I think a lot of people would have took at the start of the season. So I don't think all hope is lost as of yet. I think we can be quite reactionary as a fan base, but like I say, we've got to put this one to bed, and hopefully when we return from the World Cup and we'll come back to the Millwall game in December, we can use that as a benchmark to kickstart the season again.
Yeah, well, we'll stop that discussion specifically about on the pitch on Saturday. Just looking in general, because you mentioned our home form, and I mean, I get to more away games than I do home games a lot. I try and get up and get to them, but 2 wins from 9, 10 points from a possible 27 at home. I don't know, can you put your finger on it? Because, I mean, you kind of get a feel of the atmosphere and what it's like. Does it feel like there's, pressure on the players? Because, I mean, you look at games like, Norwich, we were fantastic. We deserved more out of the game. You looked at Burnley game. Obviously, we were probably one of the best performances of the season for that first 45 minutes and then suddenly turned on its head. So it's not like, it doesn't seem to me like the team have got a mental block of not playing well at home. I think we've played some of our best football at home. And I can't put my finger on it, and it seems like Tony Mowbray can't either. But, I mean, what is it with our home form? Why have we only got 10 points out of 27 this season?
I think, one of the big factors in obviously the difference between, say, this season and last, and maybe over the course of the past couple of seasons, is there is a huge difference in quality all of a sudden. And look, although it doesn't make for pretty reading, you are right in the sense 2 wins. It's 2 wins over basically the teams that we came up with. I mean, ultimately, if we're trying to look for a positive, we played Rotherham kind of the midpoint of the year in League One at home, and we couldn't get close to them. And on the occasion that we played them this time round in this division, we absolutely battered them. Wigan, we come from behind to win, but I think, look, in respect to the atmosphere, the one thing I would never want to do is, kind of openly criticise and say like it's been a bad place to play, because the reality is it's just not true. That being said, though, I think a lot of teams who have had maybe previous experience of coming to the stadium like in the past, of players have played here, they know that as a fan base, we can get on players' backs. There can be moans and groans if things aren't going our way. Obviously, we haven't been blessed with the best or most competent referees so far this season. So I think frustrations can boil over at times. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I think in terms of the numbers we get through the door, fantastic. Certainly can't be questioned. But yeah, I think as a fan base, we perhaps can do a little bit more in terms of being a little more vociferous in the ground and trying to roar them on. But that being said, I think that's a two-way street. So although it was very, very flat on Saturday, I think if we came out and, we maybe scored in the first 10 minutes, the atmosphere would have just been completely different. And I think that will go hand in hand. So, next time round, we've got Millwall. I think we've got West Bromwich Albion a week or so later. You maybe win that game, you win the next one. The atmosphere will pick up again, absolutely. Yeah. And obviously, as it closes towards Christmas as well, we're going to have much bigger crowds as well. Of course, maybe that comes with more expectant fans as well, those who perhaps haven't been, who maybe come for the seasonal games and things like that. But look, one thing I would say, I think the fans, broadly speaking, have done well. They're staying with the team. A lot of them are very, very realistic in terms of knowing how difficult it's going to be this season. Like I say, it's a much, much tougher set of opposition that we're going to come across every single week. What we need to do now is we just need to win any sort of game. We'll play beautiful football, but I dare say that we would have took the scruffiest, ugliest performance of winning 1-0 the other day rather than, all of this ticky-tacky stuff. But yeah. I'm confident it'll come. I don't think that we're going to be in trouble towards the end of the season.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. I'm exactly the same place. But just one last point about the weekend again, because just been reading quite a lot of comments about it. Because obviously you were there at the weekend and you take your kids, and whenever I go to the game, I take my kids as well. There was some reports of whether it was been a few reports of bother after the game. I'm sure you were kind of away by then and not around then, but I'm not sure. Did you experience anything or see anything about some of those reports of the fans not maybe behaving themselves as they should after the game or anything during the game?
Yeah, it's becoming a bit of a regular occurrence now, to be honest with you. The last couple of home games, there has been incidents, whether in the ground or away from the ground. And to be honest, I mean, that really does need clamping down. The other day in particular, it kind of kicked off basically from kickoff, really, in terms of, look, I know it still draws a big argument whether people agree or disagree, but still think that's quite poor that as a football club that we don't support the taking of the knee. Like I say again, that's just my opinion. I don't necessarily speak on behalf of anybody else. And I think a lot of people may have, opinions on other things that it may represent, but I think football clubs have been quite clear as to what they are demonstrating and what they are doing it for. That is an anti-racism gesture, and I think it's quite poor that such a big song and dance is made about people just booing it. And it's not just pockets. It really is loud. Like I say, I can't quite get my head around that one. I never have. It's maybe something that if you don't like it, maybe just sit silent for a couple of seconds, respect it. Beyond that, obviously there has been a number of reports about things being thrown on the pitch. That in particular needs condemning from the football club. It wasn't just bits of the poppy display rolled up, scrunched bits of paper. There was a video that was circulating on Twitter where something was thrown at the Cardiff goalkeeper that people reportedly said was like a lighter. Again, I can't comment on what that particularly was, but it doesn't look good. We've had an opposition player walk around the pitch. Things have been thrown at him. And I think, to be honest, as fans, what we need to do is we need to really come out and condemn that, because we're quick enough to throw our hands up and say it's not on when, the fans in the North Stand up are throwing things at fans below. And I think we've just got to demonstrate a better level of behaviour. But, it's not isolated incidents. These have been reported a number of times now, in particular in the South Stand. And I know that the club are aware. There has been obviously comments about safety and things like that. And I'd ideally like to think that moving forward, we can try and just get past some of their daft behaviour, really, because as Sunderland fans, we know when we're fully focused on supporting the team what a difference we can be. And I just think some of the things we've been sidetracked with in recent games, it's been silly in terms of the stuff about James McLean. Obviously, like I say, Saturday's antics. The last thing we want to do is develop a reputation as a football club that we're not very nice people. So like I say, it wasn't the best of atmospheres to be in and amongst, but again, the vast majority of the fans, they do their job. These are just isolated incidents, and I would never say it's a reflection as us as a whole. But it just needs to stop. And ideally, I'd like to think that not just us. I think other fan groups can perhaps come out and obviously demonstrate their opinions on that as well.
Yeah, I completely agree, mate. And taking the knee as well, the reaction to that. I'm with you. Don't really can't get my head around that. But I mean, just in terms of going to the game, I mean, obviously going to away games, you kind of you expect a bit more, different atmosphere at away games. But at home games, I'm kind of getting to the point where I do think twice about taking the kids now. Sometimes you do kind of think, what kind of an atmosphere is it going to be like, and all that sort of
Yeah.
stuff. So
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I don't typically, kind of get involved in terms of reading things on social media or kind of the message boards of such, but I did make a particular visit over to Ready to Go on the weekend after the game. So I just, read other people's, kind of the varying of events of what happened. And obviously there was, the fighting that took place where some of the Sunderland fans had, it kind of started some aggro with some families who'd come to support Cardiff. And I mean, even behaviour like that, it's not warranted, it's not needed. We know obviously improvements need to be made in terms of obviously the policing of certain areas around the ground, but even stuff like that, it's not needed. And once upon a time Sunderland were called a family club. And I think if we can maybe, kind of instill that sort of motive, because like you're saying, you're maybe thinking once or twice about bringing the kids, and that sort of thing might have a lasting impact, and thinking, actually, no, I'm not gonna bother bringing them. That's the next generation of fans. I'll be honest, I've sat in the same place where I have now for over 20 years, and I think towards the end of this season, I'll probably be making provisions to actually move our seats. I've got two young kids, and look, I'm not one of those, people who takes offence at swearing or anything like that. I just simply tell my little girl it's at the football, and whatever you hear at the football, you just, block it out, so to speak. But yeah, like I say, there's some things that I really do disagree with, and like I say, if we can sort of just clamp that out, it'll make it a better environment for everybody, I think.
Yeah. I took the lad to Bramall Lane, and it was about 4 days before the new school term started. So he went to school with a whole host of new words to use when he went back to school, which he was over the moon with. But let's leave that behind, and let's leave the weekend behind, because let's get on to what happened on Monday night. And for those who may not know, because quite a lot of the commentary of that event was covered on social media mainly, but on Monday evening, Kristjaan Speakman, Kyril Louis-Dreyfus, Steve Davison and Dave Jones held a meeting with Sunderland fans and discussed a whole range of topics. I mean, it's been kind of 18 months since Kyril Louis-Dreyfus bought the club out, and but since then, there's been pretty much silence, and they've just got on with things, and it's just getting the business done, and we're not bothered about kind of engaging. You're just going to see what we get done, apart from the odd club kind of podcast, which is probably, they take a look at what's going out before they actually put it out. They're not going to put anything out there if that's controversial. But there's been all that silence, and then suddenly a meeting with fans. And actually, I think it was the first topic that was up for discussion on the actual night, because it's a massive shift in communication strategy, which, I mean, I'm still kind of on the fence on where it's going to go and what it's going to do. I think Kyril Louis-Dreyfus said that he got the club into a position now where he thinks, right, he's got the people. I think he said he's got the people in place where he thinks he can go and do this now, and he can change the strategy. But I mean, what do you make of like having the event in the first place, and kind of the owner's response to being asked about this sudden change in how they communicate?
I think you've got to strike the balance just right, haven't you? I mean, once upon a time, obviously, there would be a message come through from say Stuart Donald saying, "Do you want to do a podcast on the weekend?" And that would be how the message was conveyed. Him and Charlie Methven done things with Roker Report. They've done things with the Love Supreme. They've done things with Wise Men Say. And for the large part of the first season, it was great. I think people enjoyed obviously that sort of connectivity. But I think what Kyril has sort of sensibly done is just kind of kept his cards to his chest. He told us on day one what his ambitions were, and really did obviously instill the message to say that there is going to be a lot of work ahead. But I think that in terms of kind of making these appearances, I think they are quite important, because in I guess pretty much actually in all of Ella Short's time in charge, you never really got an understanding of the way he was thinking, or the way he was working, or just what sort of sense of direction he wanted to take the club. Then you just got the complete opposite of that under Madrox's time in charge. But I think now, obviously, in terms of Kyril Louis-Dreyfus, although we have had a couple of, kind of obstacles and challenges along the way in time of he's been in charge, but I mean, there's been nothing but progression really since the day that he actually took over. If you kind of think back to where we were, who was in charge, who was managing us, I think if somebody said, look, let him navigate through this first season, which we came very, very close to obviously getting promoted, only falling short in the playoffs, but that first full season he's got us up. We now look quite stable and at home in the Championship in his second full season. So I think it's only fair that obviously he does come out and he does answer questions, and obviously just kind of keeps people up to date. But I think by doing it in the way that he has, it's a hell of a lot more professional in terms of doing these more frequent in future. I guess it would just be important to say maybe it should be recorded. I mean, at the time that we're recording this, I don't know if the club's recorded anything in particular. All we kind of got was sort of second-hand information. It was tweeted out by another fan site, which, again, kind of from the response and looking at the message boards, it was suggested that, some of the tweets weren't the true reflection of what was said, was maybe paraphrased and chunks were missing of what was, accurately responded to in terms of the questions. But I would refer people to Phil Smith at the Sun on Deck. He actually put something out earlier on, and it does seem that it is quite, chunky in terms of full and accurate responses of what we've got. Like I say, I'm a fan of these regular updates, but I'm a fan of doing them in a more professional manner, rather than asking, podcasts and fan sites to host them. I think it's important to do them in the appropriate surroundings and making sure, obviously, that basically they just convey the proper messages that tell us what's going on, rather than just kind of tell us things that we want to hear. Because there was a lot of things that have come out since then, which, got people panicking somewhat about maybe what we're going to do if we're going to be selling players. But I think the important thing is to tell us why these actions need to be taken. And like I said, just be open and be transparent, because, I think in football, you're always a decision away from upsetting somebody. And those in charge, they'll know that up here, that is amplified big style. And I can't imagine they're going to sit and complacently think that they've earned our trust forever. They're going to know that some sections of the fan base, they'll choose going to lean towards a certain thing or way of working, whereas the other half will lean towards the other. But like I say, I think it's just important that what he does is he comes out and, it just keeps us up to date with what's going on. And I'm quite satisfied with the answers that's been provided so far, yeah.
Well, I mean, just as you were talking there, I mean, because I had the same sort of feeling, like these, it's a bit strange where it's and don't get us wrong, I think it's a good thing that, he's come out and he's been in front of some fans and he's answered questions, and the questions were coming and they talked about all of these issues that are ongoing. But just to have that as a small group, and then, as you said, only that small group of people who were able to attend and get in whatever kind of venue it was, that, that they were the only ones who heard that firsthand. I mean, maybe some sort of like online thing that, is a kind of a real-time question and answer thing, but is recorded and people can, it's put up on YouTube or put up on the website or something like that. And people, all of the fans kind of worldwide, can hear those answers and actually hear them talk, so they can make their own assessment of the answers. Because like you said, we'll come on to some of the topics in a minute, but I mean, like you said, when people are hearing it second, third hand, and then it ends up, kind of getting lost in translation when people are passing the message on,
Yeah.
it kind of, they're almost shooting themselves in the foot by not putting it out there.
Yeah, I mean, I had a mate in attendance. To be fair, I think it's probably common knowledge now, but it was reported that Dave Jones in particular was very unhappy with a piece of information that went out. He said that the answer that he provided to one of the questions was not a true and fair representation of what he basically said. And I think, like I say, that's where you maybe have, somewhat a little bit of an issue, where I think it's probably fair to say that sometimes, there can be a bit of a desperate race to be the first one out to report things and get a bit of engagement on social media. But, I think in doing so, and by paraphrasing quotes here and there, it's probably not the right way to do things. I've been to these things in the past. I went to one with Niall Quinn and Steve Bruce many moons ago. And the first thing that they said when they came on stage, they actually said, could we ensure that fans that don't report on anything live as we're doing it? Because, you'll hear an answer and you think, I've got to go tell my mates that, and you've missed a chunk of what they've then said, and like you said, things just get lost in translation. So yeah, to be honest, I think that'd be a great idea. Whether Sunderland are technologically savvy enough to do anything like that, I mean, look, I've reasonable to suggest it should be relatively straightforward, but it might be one of those things where we might come back to it at a later stage. That, however, in fairness, is something that hopefully the Red and White Army can do, in greater detail. Because although it was held at a really good venue for Sunderland, which I'd encourage a lot of people to go to for any particular event, maybe something at one of the function suites at the Stadium of Light or something like that, where there can be a bigger capacity of attendance. Because, like I say, obviously there is a race and rush for tickets, and a lot of people are going to miss out. And like I say, so far the only thing that we've heard really is, kind of tweets which have come out from a fan site that a member of the board isn't quite happy with. But we've also got a version of events from Phil Smith. Whether the Red and White Army is going to put anything online as well and say this is documented minutes, I don't know. But it'd be ideal if you could maybe watch the footage back. It'd be pretty good. Like you say, obviously for fans who live outside the area, questions and things like that could be put to them at the time, who knows. But I think the important takeaway is that at least these things are being done. Basically fans are being able to sort of sit in front of Kyril Louis-Dreyfus. They're able to sit in front of Kristjaan Speakman, and they are able to actually put questions to them. And it's not just, with, say, sanitized podcasts which are being put out, by the club. And that's not me, kind of necessarily stating anything bad about the club podcasts, because I think they're great. But unfortunately, they would even be the first to say they're going to have to toe the company line. They wouldn't be able to say anything too controversial. They wouldn't be able to put a question to them without permission, so to speak, or without anything being pre-approved or greenlit. So I think by doing these sorts of events, it just enables that they can actually, be put in front of an audience without preparing answers, and we can actually get a fair and accurate sort of version of events of where we are as a football club and where they're planning on taking us.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they do next. But just in terms of the actual content, they talked about things like this, the state of the stadium, departure of Alex Neil, and again, all of this information that we're going to be talking about is all second hand, third hand. I think everyone knows someone or knows someone who knew someone who was actually there on the night. But it seemed like the big topic up for debate, and then especially that what followed on kind of social media afterwards was kind of Ross Stewart contract talks, and kind of, I think, linked to that there was some comments about, I think you've already touched on it, was kind of stating there's going to be, there's likely going to be a time when we're going to have to sell our best players and maybe use that money to kind of keep improving. From my point of view, I didn't think there was any new revelation in that sort of statement. As much as I'd be absolutely gutted if Ross Stewart left, and I think everyone would, and I think that's just an obvious statement, I think it's important that if we have to sell, that we do it at the right time, and we kind of try and strike that balance of doing it at the right time. Because you can go way back, you can look at tons of examples. Going back to the likes of Kevin Phillips back in the day, I think Quinny used him as an example a few times when he was chairman, about talking about selling players when they were right at their peak almost, because then you're losing a player who's kind of losing their abilities and you're losing value at the same time. We'll turn down 15-20 million for Cornet. And I think, I can probably go back to saying, maybe we held on to the likes of Marco Gabardini for too long, even going way back. But on the flip side, there's deals like, you can look at Josh Madger. Maybe we didn't bite the bullet and hang on to him to try and achieve something out of that. So you can look at it both ways. But to me, it makes, overall, it makes perfect sense to say that, we have to look at getting the timing right on these things. When you heard that statement, did you have any issue with it?
No, but I won't lie to say that when I first read it, when I first seen it, I thought, oh Christ, this is happening so much sooner than I thought it would. And I'll be honest with you, I was gutted. But then, the story that came out basically to say that Dave Jones was apparently not happy with the way that was sort of portrayed online. Look, I think, like you've said, basically, over the course of all of my life and all of your life, Sunderland have made a lot of catastrophic transfer dealings. You picked out Lamine Kone, for example, who'd had, a couple of decent months with us, and we then held on to him where we could have made an absolute fortune and profit. And, I think the club tried to demonstrate a little bit of ambition, which is, fair enough. They really dug their heels in, but subsequently we committed to then pay him reportedly like about £90,000 a week. So that's when it goes wrong. I mean, when somebody like Kyril Jones' stock was very, very high, and he was linked with Tottenham, and he was linked with a lot of other teams as well, you maybe look at that and think that was probably the time to do that, rather than, say, sell him to Stoke a couple of years later and then do that over a staggered schedule of receiving a couple of million every couple of years. But what I would say is, and this is not just exclusive to Sunderland, no matter what football club you support, every single football player has a valuation. Every single player will be up for sale, so to speak. Maybe not Manchester City, maybe not, say, Newcastle now that they've got all of their money as well. Maybe they can, say, dig in and hang on a little bit longer. But every player has their valuation. And it's like you said, it's making sure you strike whilst the iron's hot. And you look through so many transfers. Some have went the right way, some haven't. Josh Madger was an absolutely shocking deal. If you think of the money that we got, it derailed our season, and it ultimately, in my opinion, cost us promotion. You can maybe look back at a few others at various times as well of the players we bring in, and we've just got them all wrong. Ultimately, now what this model is, it's going to rub people up the wrong way, and it's going to upset a lot of people because you're going to get so attached to somebody like Ross Stewart. But when a big deal is put to us on the table that we can't, literally say no to, that is obviously where the club is going to have to look at that money and reinvest it and basically try and bring in more players. I know one of these quotes, which was quite misquoted from Dave Jones, was something along the lines of saying that Sunderland need to sell players to sort of attract other players. And I think my interpretation of that was basically Sunderland, what they need to do is they need to show that we are a pathway of success for players. So if you look at, say, somebody like Ross Stewart, and I mean it with the greatest of respect, he literally had no career of note before coming to Sunderland. Not many people would have heard of him. He's bided his time. He went through the first couple of months without making much of an impact. He had an amazing season last season. He started very, very brightly this season. But now it seems that we're in a position where it seems very, very unlikely that we're going to strike some sort of deal with him on his contract. I know we've got the extension, but it's basically now determining what he's worth to us. So I think if somebody came in with an offer of less than 5 million and the club were to accept, I'd be very, very upset with that. It's determining what he's worth, but that's what's going to be subjective to so many, because there's a lot of people who will argue that if he was fit all season, that he could have potentially had us in a playoff position. He would have turned some of those 0-0s into wins, and he would have turned some of the defeats into draws. So you would maybe ask those particular people, what is he worth? And they might argue that, well, if he's worth promotion to the Premier League, then he's worth an extra 100 million to us. But obviously, like I say, you've just got to have a bit of a nuance to the argument, and you've got to make sure we do things the right way. I do not want to lose him. I am very, very much in the camp where I want to extend his contract, and I want to make sure that we can tie him down for a couple of seasons. But the reality is he's going to have ambitions of playing further up the ladder. I think obviously Rangers is the club who he's linked with. I'd be gutted if he went there. I really would, because with all due respect to Rangers or to Celtic or anybody like that, Scottish football is not, in my opinion, somewhere where he should be plying his trade. I think he could go on to play in the Premier League, and I think that is ultimately where he wants to go. Now, his ambitions may exceed ours, because I think he will want to get there sooner than we physically can do, but that's where we're going to have to compromise. So what we will then have to do is we'll have to sell him, but we'll then have to take that vision and sell that to other players down the line. So you look at somebody like Jack Clarke, who have basically got out of a Premier League squad, who maybe made the wrong move at the wrong time to a massive club like Tottenham, perhaps fell a little bit out of love with football. You look at the likes of Patrick Roberts as well. You go to these players who you know have talent, who you know fit into what we're trying to do, and you tell them, and you say, you look at the success that we've done with other players and how we've rebuilt their career, and that's how we entice people back into the club. So like I say, I know a lot of people might have took sort of a bit of a different outlook to what Dave Jones has reportedly said, but that's my interpretation on it. Ultimately, there is going to be players along the journey that come with us. Some are going to stay for more longer than others, But unfortunately, some are going to be cherry picked as well by clubs who have much, much more money than us. And ultimately, some of these players are going to go to teams in the same division as well. That's going to aggravate people, but unfortunately, that's just the nature of football. That's not just Sunderland because we are, trying to make a couple of pounds here and there. That is Sunderland trying to be as sustainable as we can. We know we're going to make losses every season going forward, but it's trying to minimise them as well as obviously progressing as a football club. But like I say, although it's a long-winded response, I think we'll sell Ross Stewart. I'm hoping we'll sell on to the summer. But like I say, it's going to be an interesting January. I think I'm just going to keep Sky Sports News off for the month, to be honest, because I'm just going to panic stations. I'm going to turn my phone off.
But we're talking about the timing in terms of Sunderland controlling it. But I mean, if I was Ross Stewart, 27-year-old, if he's probably at the peak. Well, he's absolutely at the peak of where he's been in terms of his profile. And if a Wolves, Southampton, West Ham, Everton, Leicester, someone at the bottom half of the Premier League come sniffing in January, I mean, we might be talking about Sunderland saying yes, no, but then, of course, on the flip side, you risk having a player who's thinking, well, no, I want to be off. It's it might be my only chance to ever play in the Premier League. If one of these clubs in January say we need a goal scorer, we can get him for, like you said, in the realms of Premier League strikers, 6, 7 million, 8 million. That's probably nothing to some of these clubs when they're looking at Premier League survival. And I wouldn't blame him if he turned around to Sunderland and said, I want to go for it. I'm sorry, but it's been great, but it's a cracking opportunity at 27, 28-year-old. I absolutely wouldn't blame him if he took one of those opportunities.
No, I wouldn't. And I mean, hey, listen, me and you, we both love Sunderland. We've travelled far and wide to watch Sunderland. We love them. This is our football club. This is everybody's football club who's listening. And we're going to look at that and we're going to say that we're the biggest club in the division. And yeah, it is going to hurt. It's going to sting when players leave. But it's a short career. But I think the difference is with somebody like Ross Stewart, I think, he's a model professional in terms of the things that you do here. But like I say, reality speaking, Ross Stewart to date has probably not earned a considerable amount of money in comparison to other footballers in the division. Maybe you look at, say, players who've been relegated from the Premier League who play at Burnley, who maybe are of a similar stature to him, or Norwich, or somebody like that, who are earning, maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 times what he's earning. So he's probably going to look at that at some point and think, look, I've got a decision to make. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get into the Premier League. Maybe it's only for a couple of months, but he's going to challenge himself to do it, and his career trajectory so far has been nothing but upwards. So like I say, I know he's only had 5, 6 games this season so far, I think, but I'm pretty confident that not only could he do a job for any team in this division, I definitely think he could be a handful for a side in the Premier League. So, look, like I say, if he leaves, I'll be gutted. I really will. But he'll not be the first big striker who we've lost. Really, we've lost Defoe twice, although the second time didn't really count. We've lost Phillips, Darren Bent, like you said, Gabby Adini, Don Goodman. The players will come and go. We've got to trust, and again, this is obviously that's the important thing, isn't it? We've got to have trust, and we've got to have faith, and we've got to have patience in the recruitment team that they can bring in somebody who basically can replicate what Ross Stewart has done. Honestly, what I'd be looking for in January now is I'd be looking out for his replacement already. Like I say, I think that quote was basically saying now might not be the time to sell, but that time is soon coming. So I think we've got to be looking at that, and we've got to be making sure that we've got somebody ready to take that spot if that day comes when he goes. We did it with Charlie Wyke, really, didn't we? Charlie Wyke scored 30 plus goals, and nobody really batted an eyelid when he went. And to be fair, that last season, he was excellent for us. But we had Ross Stewart waiting in the ranks. So that's the way I'd like to think that we will operate from this point going forward. If he goes, we've got somebody who's ready to take a spot. Like I say, it'll be a sad day. He's made a really good mark on his time here at Sunderland. We'll all remember that the memories that he gave us in the playoff semi-final and the playoff final. Great guy, but I think he's destined for bigger things. And unfortunately, at the moment, we're still a million miles away from the Premier League, whereas he's probably going to have the opportunity sooner than we are.
Yeah, you almost brought tears to my eyes. Remembering the day when Don Goodman and Mark all left, but yeah, sitting here reminiscing over that. But the thing is, the difference is now. If we do, let's say we do lose Ross Stewart. The difference is now. Again, you mentioned it earlier on. Looking at where we were exactly 12 months ago, actually looking at exactly where we were, what we would have been talking about if we were doing a pod, a year ago exactly. Our last three games. 5-1 defeat at Rotherham, 3-0 defeat at Sheffield Wednesday, and the last game before the date we're recording, we were dumped out of the FA Cup in the first round against Mansfield Town, just to give you some good memories of that. But looking at Kristjaan Speakman, looking at those transfer windows, looking at what Stuart Harvey's done since he's come to the club, I'd now trust the club with saying, yeah, we're going to cash in, because actually now I'd trust the club and the people at the club to spend that money and actually improve us again.
Yeah, and look, like I say, it's a mad thing that basically you can kind of view this in a positive, so to speak. But I think that actually represents how much we've progressed. It's not just Ross Stewart who's the talking point. It's Dennis Serkin who's linked with a move back to Tottenham. He's been linked with Brentford. So we have high caliber players who people are obviously going to be sniffing around. We're going to have Premier League scouts at our games, of course we are. But like I say, obviously, what we now need to kind of demonstrate to obviously new recruits is that we've got a tremendous track record over the course of the past year or so. Yeah, not every single one of these transfers has worked out, but you're probably talking at least 90% plus of the dealings that we've done have been successful. And like I say, I think that the football club they'll be desperate to keep Ross Stewart. That I'm confident of. I can't imagine that there's any part of Tony Mowbray or any part of the board that's kind of whoring Ross Stewart out, so to speak, to basically say let's just sell him or anything like that. I honestly do not think that is what we're doing, but I think we are being realistic. And we are probably going to have to strike while the iron's hot. I'm just going to touch on something, by the way, sorry, just mentioning Tony Mowbray. One thing that kind of aggravated me a little bit was some of the comments that was made about Ross Stewart. I think it was last week, where they were talking about fees and things like that. And he got into a bit of a hypothetical discussion about, agents and haggling for transfers. And one of the fees that was mentioned was 28 million, and then basically asking a side to come back for 5. Like, one thing I would say is, I think the media people within the football club should probably be having a word to say, like, please do not throw around those figures, because there is nobody in our side who is going to command that sort of fee. Not yet. Probably not for a long time. Maybe even until we get back in the Premier League. Even as a Premier League club, we've only ever achieved that with Jordan Pickford. So I think maybe we can try and prevent, obviously, throwing that sort of figure out. And then if we were to say sell Stewart in January, or we're sell him for next summer, I'd hate to think that anybody would refer back to that and say, hold on, we've sold him for, say, 5 or 7, but we were promised 28. That really does need to be stopped as well, because that's like I say, conveying that sort of message out in public, it's really not conducive to anybody's sort of ideas of what sort of money that we're going to be bringing in for any of these players.
You give little faith. Just wait till Jewison Bennett smashes Costa Rica into the World Cup final, gets the golden boot, and then we get 40 million bid in from Juventus or someone. But just on Tony Mowbray, just where, because me and Gav touched on it last week, and well, again, second-hand comments, but it seemed like they were asking the fans who were there to kind of back the manager and get behind him. And I kind of find it difficult to have too many issues with Tony Mowbray. There was that one. Some, one or two comments in post-match interviews and all this sort of stuff. But from just looking at it, on the pitch and what he's had to deal with. Considering he's only had, I think it's like 2 games in charge, with kind of, fully fit out and out strikers. I think he's had a decent crack at the job so far with what he's had to kind of cope with. And some of the football we've played in spells with him as manager has been some of the best I've seen us play in years. And in my book, we're pretty much where we should be. Anything higher would be exceeding expectations. Anything lower, I'd be getting a bit nervous. But do you think some of the criticism is fair? Because I think with the job he's done so far, I think certainly he needs to get his strikers fit and then give him a decent crack at the job, and then let's see how he's doing after that.
Yeah, I think look, his hands have been tied behind his back, haven't they? Like you say, he's been going into games where he's had no striker. I think if you look at basically when he came in and he had a near enough fit squad, he beat Rotherham 3-0. I'll be open and honest. He was never ever my first choice for the job, and I'll be honest, I was quite surprised actually when his name was bandied about, because I just never thought it would happen. At the time, I was convinced we were going to go down the route of appointing a younger manager. But to be fair, it's the appointment that made the most sense at the time. He's got a pretty solid track record of improving teams, especially if you look at Blackburn in the past few years. And where he's left them now, he's left them as a side who, with a few kind of tweaks and enhancements, are challenging at the top end of the table once again. So I'd like to think if we could have that sort of journey with him a couple of years from now, or whenever his time's up with us, that if he's to leave us in a position where we're at the top end of the table, brilliant. In terms of the criticism, look, like I say, supporting Sunderland, it's an ordeal at times, isn't it? But it's also very, very subjective. So in terms of, I may watch, and come away and think, such and such had a good game there, and somebody might think I'm talking absolute rubbish. So far, like I say, I think it's probably not right, to kind of be starting a debate on whether he should be in charge or not, because I think his position's certainly safe. I would have certainly liked some of the results to have been better along the way, of course, but I think if we can hopefully go into Friday night, get a good result against Birmingham, and then have the break, get them away for this warm weather training camp, get the lads back fit who's been out for such a long time, we're going to be attacking the second half of the season with what, maybe 5 or 6 players that we actually haven't had for quite some time. I mean, by the time Dan Ballard comes back, we haven't even mentioned him, we forgot about him. By the time somebody like him comes back, he's going to be like a new signing once again. I'm never the type who basically says, we can't criticise or anything like that, because I look back at the weekend and I think the team that he picked, I think it was poor. I sat there for the best part of the first half and I'm thinking, you need to make a change. You need to even make a change in the first half. And he didn't do it. And ultimately, within the first 3 minutes of the second half, we didn't pay heed to that warning and we've conceded. But like I say, I think there is positives. I think the positives outweigh the negatives. Like you said, some of the football we've played at times, Christ, you look back at the goal we scored against Reading, look at the goal we scored against Huddersfield. I mean, we've never knocked the ball around like that, not even in some of the Premier League days. So, like I say, I'm very much of the belief that we should certainly, stick with him, keep behind him. But one thing I would say is, look, the noise on social media and message boards, things like that, it's always different to the noise that you'll hear inside of a ground. Stick the telly on Friday night, or for anybody who's travelling down there, the full away end will be behind them. And it'll be the same when, when we pick back up after the World Cup. Still be chance of Tony Mowbray's Red and White Army. So I think that can be the thing with social media. It can be explosive, it can be reactionary. And what'll happen is when things are retweeted and amplified, it almost, kind of conveys this message that, people are wanting them out and things like that. I haven't heard any chance, and I haven't seen anything in particular yet that in my opinion would warrant him and his head on the chopping block, so to speak. He just needs a bit of time. I mean, look, he came in to obviously a difficult set of circumstances as well. Obviously, when Alex Neil, kind of just left us on no notice. Give him until January. Let's see what players he brings in, and then hopefully, like I say, we can have a decent second half of the season. But like you said, in terms of where we are now, it's about right. I'm happy with where we are. I know we break the fourth wall. We're currently recording whilst a lot of games are going on this evening, so I don't know where we are as we speak. But middle of the pack, I would have snapped your hands off for that a few months ago.
Yeah, we've actually dropped to 17th, but in terms of points, we're no closer to the bottom 3. In terms of points, we're still 4 points clear of the bottom 3. But I'm glad you said that about social media, because it's normally me saying that about social media, and I only find out because people keep telling me what people are saying on social media, which is annoying in itself. But you mentioned Friday night. So let's move on to the Birmingham game at St Andrews. As you said, I think the away end sold out. So I think we've got just over 2,000 making the trip to the West Midlands. And it's a trip that I hate making. I first went to St Andrews in 1996. Steve Agnew and Andy Melville give us a 2-0 win under Reedy. I think at the time it was Barry Fry who pretty much bought every player who ever made an appearance in the Football League, I think, for Birmingham at the time. I think he had about a squad of like 60 players or something ridiculous like that. But it all kicked off that day, so it's a ground I hate going to. Looking at our recent record at St Andrews, we won in the League Cup in 2014. But in the league, we haven't won since Mickey Gray scored the winner back in September 1997. Just looking at the current league, because it's been moving around tonight. They're 10th in the league, so there's 7 places above us, and there's 4 points between the two sides. Looking again at their form, they're unbeaten at home in the last 5, although they've drawn 4 out of 9 at home this season. On the face of it, I think it's going to be a tough one, but I don't know about you, but I'm more confident at the moment when we're playing away from home.
Yeah, I'm pretty much the same actually. I think it actually causes us to play better football really when teams, kind of sit on top of us, they put us under pressure, and it enables us to play on the counter. It's going to be a tough game. Like you say, it's never been a pleasant place to go. Although these days it's a lot emptier than it used to be. They don't get big crowds. But that being said, what they lack in terms of that, they do make up with a pretty decent team. I think if you offered me, kind of predictions or anything like that last week, I ideally would have wanted 4 points out of the Cardiff game and this game, which kind of leaves us chasing, obviously. Yeah, I mean, look, they've had some pretty decent wins. They've probably done a little bit better than people might have given them credit or thought so far, but why not? Like I say, we've obviously won at a couple of tough places so far this season. A lot of people will be keen to write us off. You'll watch Sky Sports and they'll be talking about, maybe we're struggling and in some form of perilous position. But like you said, look, you go win a game and all of a sudden you shoot straight back up the table. We are missing, obviously, a couple of people who go 9s out. It'll be a really, really big loss. But what better opportunity now for somebody like Trey Hume to try and come in and obviously cement that place as his own, because he's finally going to get a good stab at it, and he's likely to start that game obviously with Gooch missing, with 09 missing, so big opportunity for a lot of players, and it's a game that I really expect us to put everything into, especially with the break. So yeah, tough one to call. I think if you ask me for a prediction now, I'd probably say a draw. But yeah, like I say, I think away from home, our form, it's a hell of a lot better. And I can't really explain why, but I don't know. I think maybe teams underestimate us, but the longer games go on whilst we're away from home, you always fancy our chances. We're always growing to it a little bit as well. So assuming and providing obviously that Tony Mowbray picks, a really decent starting 11, we're going to need a bit of experience in there. We're going to need the likes of Pritchard. We're going to need Corey Evans back in there as well. I'm pretty confident that we can go get a decent result.
Yeah, and it's funny actually. I mean, I'm gonna go for another score draw like we had at Luton. I think it's going to be a similar game to the one at Luton. I think it's going to be a tough game, hopefully as well, because I mean, after that Luton game, we had to bounce back after the Burnley game, so we had to kind of hit back. And I think the team was superb down at Luton after that Burnley game. I think that we didn't know how we were going to react to that, because it was a massive blow after that kind of switch at half time. But having said that, I went for us to absolutely stuff Cardiff at the weekend. So clearly I know absolutely now. But I mean, the frustrating thing about Sunderland at the minute, I mean, we're talking about trying to predict, but and again, it might be the makeup of the team and the style that we play, the young side that we've got, and trying to be on the front foot and play in a certain way. But it's just frustrating that you just don't know what Sunderland's going to turn up.
Yeah. But I think that obviously that comes with having such an experienced side, unfortunately. This isn't sort of the foregone conclusions in the past where you'd maybe have, Roy Keane's championship sides going to places where you think, right, we're coming away with at least a point, or Peter Reid's side where you're like, we're going to win just by how many today. But you are right, and I think that's obviously where players are going to have to stand up and try and demonstrate a bit more accountability. You look at the game the other day and a lot of heads went down. There was a lot of naivety in some of the things that were done, but they've got to learn from that. They've got to grow from it, And I think in terms of what we're doing now, we're kicking along okay. Granted, I think some of the results that we've had in recent weeks have been poor. But yeah, like you say, it's just that uncertainty. Unfortunately, we've haven't been blessed with obviously having the full fitness of everybody of late. But if we, like I say, if we can go into this one and we can play the game we know we can try and frustrate the opposition, just slow things down, and obviously just keep them at bay. Most important thing is to try and come away at least, without conceding, and we've just got to take our chances. Somebody who was obviously, maybe considered below par the other day was Ellis Sims. He's nowhere near fit.
No.
But you just look at the difference that he made when he came on at Luton. You look at the difference that he made when he came on against Huddersfield. So I think if we use him correctly, maybe it's the case that we don't start him. You bring him on perhaps at half-time. Like I say, it's a game that we can go and win. And, we've surprised a few teams this season coming away from places where we haven't been given a chance. So why not do it in another one?
That's it. And let's hope the lads can get us a much needed 3 points and give us a good Friday night and set us up for the weekend. But on that note, thank you very much, Craig. Always a pleasure, mate.
No problem. Let's hope the next time it's going to be another hungover podcast, maybe celebrating promotion, just like the last.
I'm looking forward to next May already.
Not League One though. Well, not League One promotion. No. Let's just clear that up. We're not going back there.
Although having said that, I wouldn't look forward to that hangover again. It's not really something I want to experience anytime soon. But thanks again, mate. Good to catch up.
Pleasure as always.
Good stuff. And thanks again for everyone for listening. Keep a look at Roker Report for all the build up ahead of our trip to Birmingham on Friday. So don't forget, it's a Friday kickoff this week, and keep an eye out on all the usual places for the pod that should be dropping very soon. But from us, bye for now.